The old cowboy had been sitting beneath Nora Bell's narrow porch roof for nearly 20 minutes before she realized he had not moved once. Freezing rain ran from the brim of his hat, his shoulders sagged against the adobe wall, and one boot rested, crooked in the mud. Nora had already barred the door for the night. She stood behind the small front window of her roadside kitchen, watching him through the wavering glass. Her 10-year-old son, Owen, stacked clean plates beside the stove. "Is he asleep?" the boy asked. "No." Nora wiped her hands on her apron. The stranger tried to stand, his knees folded beneath him. That settled it. Nora pulled back the wooden bar and opened the door. Cold rain swept across the floor. "Sir?" The old man lifted his head. His beard was silver. Water ran down the deep lines beside his mouth. "My horse threw a shoe 3 miles back," he said. "I thought I could walk it." "You thought wrong." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Yes, ma'am." Nora stepped into the rain and caught his arm before he slipped again. "Owen, move the chair beside the stove." Together they got the stranger inside. His coat weighed nearly as much as a soaked blanket. Nora peeled it away from his shoulders and hung it near the stove. She brought him a dry shirt that had belonged to her husband. For half a second, her hand stayed on the worn collar. Then she passed it over. "Change behind the curtain." The old man nodded. "My name is Asa. Nora Bell." She pointed toward Owen. "My son." Owen gave a serious little nod. Asa changed, then lowered himself carefully into the chair. Nora poured hot broth into a tin cup. "You running this place alone?" Asa asked. "I'm feeding you, not answering questions." He looked at the cup. Fair arrangement. Nora almost smiled. The kitchen had once served passing freight crews. Her husband, Daniel, had kept a small wagon stop beside it, where drivers could water teams and buy a hot meal. After Daniel died, his business partner disappeared with half the accounts unsettled. Since then, Nora had kept only the kitchen open. She cooked when travelers came. She kept books for 2 local teamsters. She repaired harness when she had to. She owed no man enough to let him tell her what to do. That mattered more than comfort. Outside, rain hammered the hard desert earth into red mud. Asa drank slowly. Owen brought another piece of mesquite for the stove. "You know horses?" Asa asked him. "A little. He knows enough to stay clear of the mean ones," Nora said. "That already puts him ahead of half the men I've worked with." Owen grinned. Nora gave Asa a second helping of broth and a blanket for the bench near the stove. "You can sleep there tonight. I can pay." Tomorrow, Asa reached toward his pocket anyway. Nora stopped him with one look. Tomorrow, he withdrew his hand. All right. By morning, the rain had passed. Sunlight spread across the wet flats, turning every puddle silver. Nora was sweeping mud from the porch when she heard riders approaching. 4 men came down the road. The man in front rode a tall bay horse and wore a dark traveling coat cut from better cloth than anyone around Juniper County needed. He dismounted before the horse had fully stopped. His eyes went straight to the open doorway. "Father?" Asa appeared behind Nora with the blanket still around his shoulders. "You took your time," the old man said. The younger man closed his eyes briefly. Then, he crossed the yard. "You vanished in a storm. I misplaced a horse. You misplaced yourself." Asa shrugged. That too. The man looked at Nora. His face was controlled, but his hand still rested tightly around one riding glove. Grant Mercer. Nora knew the name. Everybody along the freight roads did. Mercer Freight and Stage ran wagons from the mining camps in the east to the territorial mail routes in the west. Grant Mercer owned more wagons than Nora had ever seen in one place. "I'm Nora Bell. My father says you took him in. He needed a stove." Grant glanced toward Asa. He needed more sense. That has been mentioned, Asa said. Grant looked back at Nora. I owe you. No. His brow moved slightly. You don't? You don't owe me because your father got caught in bad weather. Grant seemed unaccustomed to having repayment refused. Before he could answer, Asa spoke. Tell her why you really came. Grant's expression changed. Nora noticed it, not embarrassment. Calculation, he looked toward the road running east, then toward the low ridge 2 miles beyond Nora's kitchen. Do you know Juniper Junction? Of course. Do you know it's failing? Nora leaned the broom against the porch. I know freight crews complain about it. They complain about everything. They complain more about Juniper. Grant studied her. The territorial mail office has given me 90 days. If the station doesn't improve, they cancel the contract. That sounds expensive. It will be. Nora folded her arms. What does it have to do with me? Grant reached into his coat and removed a folded paper. I want you to run it. For several seconds, Nora said nothing. Owen, standing inside the doorway, nearly dropped the bucket he was carrying. Nora looked from the paper to Grant. You rode out here to offer a kitchen widow a freight station? I rode out here looking for my father. Then, you found him. I also found you. That is not an answer. Grant stepped onto the porch. 3 years ago, Bell Freight Stop turned wagons faster than Juniper does now. Your husband handled the teams. Nora's shoulders tightened. Grant continued. You handled the books, loading order, meal schedules, supplier accounts, and departure board. How do you know that? I asked. That answer bothered her more than boasting would have. Grant unfolded the paper. 90 days. Superintendent of Juniper Junction. Salary paid weekly. Nora took the agreement. Her eyes moved quickly down the page, then slower. Grant waited. When she finished, she handed it back. No. Asa raised an eyebrow. Grant did not. Why? Because this makes me responsible for every failure at that station, but I can't change the schedules without regional approval. I can't replace workers. I can't reject freight. I can't change rates. I can't even order repairs above $20. You read quickly. I had practice. The terms are standard. That's another reason not to sign them. One of Grant's riders looked away, hiding a smile. Grant noticed. So what would you require? Authority matching responsibility. His gaze sharpened. Explain 90 days. I control daily schedules. I post the actual rates. I recommend hiring and dismissal directly to you. If your regional manager blocks repairs, I can appeal to you without going through him. Grant said nothing. Nora stepped closer. And if I fail, you can replace me. You're asking for more authority than some men who have worked for me 10 years. Then hire one of them. Asa coughed into his fist, suspiciously close to a laugh. Grant looked at his father. Then, back at Nora. When can you start? Nora paused. That was not the answer she expected. Today, done. By afternoon, Nora Bell stood inside Juniper Junction. The place smelled of wet leather, axle grease, mule sweat, and old coffee. 3 wagons waited in the yard. 2 drivers argued beside the loading shed. A clerk sat behind the station counter, copying figures into a thick dispatch book. Nora ignored all of them at first. She found an old black slate leaning behind a broken bench. Who uses this? The clerk looked up. No one. They do now. Nora carried it outside and set it beside the loading gate. She took a piece of chalk from the office. At the top she wrote, "Arrival departure delay." The clerk came outside. Mrs. Bell, we already keep those numbers in the dispatch book. Good. She opened the book. Then she checked the first wagon in the yard. It had arrived at 12:40. The book said 12:15. Nora checked the second. It had not yet finished unloading. The book listed it as departed 10 minutes earlier. She looked down the page. Then, the next. Then, the next. Grant had followed her outside. What is it? Nora held the book toward him. These wagons aren't running late. Grant frowned. They clearly are. No. She tapped the page. They're running backward. For the first time that day, Grant Mercer had no answer. By sunrise the next morning, Nora had already moved the black slate closer to the loading gate. She stood with a piece of chalk in one hand and Grant's dispatch book in the other. The first wagon came in 12 minutes late. Nora wrote 12 minutes. The clerk, Eli Turner, watched from the office door. You planning to write every delay where everyone can see it? Yes, that will upset the drivers. Then, they can arrive on time. What if the schedule is wrong? Nora looked at him. That's what I intend to find out. She spent the next 6 hours doing almost nothing that looked important. She watched. A southbound freight wagon arrived with 2 tired horses and a cracked rear brace. The schedule allowed 15 minutes before departure. It took 9 minutes just to unload the heavier crates. The horses needed water. One wheel had to be lifted. A driver discovered a torn strap. By the time the wagon was honestly ready, 38 minutes had passed. Nora wrote the actual departure time. The driver glanced at the slate. Crane won't like that. Who is Crane? Mr. Wesley Crane. Regional manager. When will I meet him? The driver gave a small, humorless laugh. Soon as he hears what you're doing. At midday, another wagon arrived. Then, another. Nora timed every part of the process. Unloading, sorting, changing teams, checking wheels, reloading, paperwork, meal breaks. Nothing matched the printed schedule. Grant arrived near noon. He had changed into a lighter coat, but the silver watch still appeared in his hand within minutes. How bad? Nora pointed at the board. Worse than it looks. That board looks terrible. That's because it's honest. Grant folded his arms. You believe the timetable is impossible? I believe nobody who wrote it ever worked this yard. I approved it. Nora looked at him. Then I believe you never worked this yard. Grant's expression hardened. Eli suddenly found a reason to go inside. Nora stepped toward the next arriving wagon. Grant followed. You accepted this job yesterday. Yes, and now you're telling me how to run my company. No, I'm telling you how your station actually runs. A teamster climbed down from the wagon seat. His face was red from the heat. Mrs. Bell, we've got 3 crates of machine parts for Weaver Mine. They want them transferred to the express wagon. Nora checked the slate. When is the express due? 20 minutes. She looked toward the loading shed. 2 men were already moving sacks of flour. A third worker was tightening a wheel hub. Those crates can wait for the afternoon run. The teamster shook his head. Mister, Crane always puts Weaver freight first. Not today. They pay extra. I know. Grant spoke behind her. She's right. Nora turned. Grant checked his watch. The express won't make its schedule if the crew stops now. The teamster frowned, but nodded. Nora looked back at Grant. That sounded painful. It was expensive. For the first time since arriving at Juniper Junction, she smiled. 3 days later, Wesley Crane rode into the yard. He was a heavy-set man in a brown vest with carefully brushed boots and a narrow mustache. He dismounted slowly. His eyes went immediately to the black slate. Then to Nora. Mrs. Bell, Mr. Crane. He looked at the column of delays. This is unnecessary. It's useful. It makes the station look incompetent. It was already incompetent. Grant stood inside the office doorway. Crane noticed him. His tone softened. Miss Mercer, I assumed this trial meant improving operations, not advertising every mistake to passing customers. Grant looked toward Nora. She said nothing. Crane continued. The Western freight companies survive on confidence. Customers need to believe the line is dependable. Nora leaned one shoulder against the slate frame. Then we should make it dependable. Crane smiled without warmth. Mrs. Bell, freight is not kitchen work. No. Her voice stayed calm. In a kitchen, if supper is 20 minutes late, people complain. Here, if a wagon is 20 minutes late and someone writes that it left on time, everyone behind it pays for the lie. Grant's gaze shifted to Crane. Crane folded a dispatch sheet twice. Those records allow for operational adjustment. They allow for fiction. The yard went quiet. Crane looked at Grant. Are you going to permit this? Grant removed his watch. He opened it, then closed it again. For 90 days. Crane's mouth tightened. Very well. He turned toward Nora. Then I hope you understand what those 90 days cost. I intend to. That afternoon, Nora canceled 2 express runs. The decision spread through Juniper Junction before supper. By morning, 3 customers had complained. One ranch supplier threatened to move his business. Grant found Nora near the loading bay. You canceled both westbound expresses. Yes, they were profitable. They were impossible. That is not the same thing. Nora handed him a loading manifest. Work 1 cycle. Grant stared at the paper. What? 1 complete dispatch cycle. No owner's office. No standing in the shade. You work where they work. His eyebrows rose. You're giving me orders now? I'm inviting you to prove me wrong. That did it. Grant removed his coat. Fine. For the next 5 hours, Nora said almost nothing. Grant carried manifests. He helped shift freight. He waited while a wheel was reset. He watched 2 exhausted workers change teams under the afternoon sun. He saw Eli copy 1 official departure time, pause, then look toward Nora before correcting it. At 3:15, the northbound freight stood ready. Grant checked his watch. The printed schedule claimed it should have left at 2:40. How far behind are we? 35 minutes. How much of that was wasted? 7. Grant looked at her. Only 7? Nora pointed toward the loading yard. The rest was work. He looked back at the men. For once, the watch remained open in his palm without commanding anything. That evening, a strong desert wind hit the station. The slate tipped sideways. Nora caught one corner. Grant caught the other. Together, they lifted it upright. White chalk dust streaked Nora's sleeve. Some had transferred to Grant's dark vest. He looked down at it. You've ruined my clothes. You survived. Barely. She laughed once before she could stop herself. Grant looked at her differently after that. Not softer. Closer, he helped brace the slate with 2 spare boards. When they finished, Nora stepped back. Tomorrow I'm changing the full schedule. That will cost more. Yes. How much? I'll know after I finish. Grant nodded slowly. Then, hoofbeats sounded from the western road. A lone rider entered the yard carrying a leather case marked with the territorial seal. He dismounted in front of the office. Grant Mercer? Grant stepped forward. Yes, the man handed him a folded notice. I'm Inspector Samuel Price, Territorial Mail Service. Grant broke the seal. His eyes moved across the page. Nora watched his face. What is it? He looked at her. The contract inspection. When? Next week. Nora glanced toward the slate. Grant shook his head. No, he handed her the notice. Tomorrow, behind them, Wesley Crane had stepped from the office. He was holding the next week's freight schedule. It was the heaviest Nora had seen yet. Nora spent the night rebuilding the schedule. By dawn, the black slate beside the gate held fewer departures than Wesley Crane's printed sheet. That was the first problem. The second was that every wagon already waiting in the yard carried something someone considered urgent. Mining tools. Mail sacks. Barrels of lamp oil. 2 crates of medical supplies. A ranch shipment marked for express delivery. Crane stood beside the office door with his folded schedule in one hand. You removed 3 runs. I moved 2. I canceled 1. You canceled the Weaver shipment. I canceled the promise that we could move it today. Crane looked toward Grant. Grant had arrived before sunrise. He said nothing. Crane opened his hands. Mr. Mercer, this station is being inspected today. Customers are already watching us. If she cuts the schedule now, the inspector will assume Juniper cannot handle the volume. Nora kept writing. He'll assume that because it's true. Crane's eyes narrowed. For today. For today, Nora agreed. Grant checked his pocket watch. Nora noticed. He noticed her. Noticing. The watch disappeared, back into his vest. Inspector Samuel Price entered the yard just after 7. He was a lean man with dust on his coat and no interest in ceremony. I don't need a tour, he said. I need to see the station work. Nora nodded. That saves time. Crane looked irritated by the answer. The morning began badly. A freight wagon arrived with a bent axle brace. A driver from the south route brought 2 extra mail sacks that had not appeared on the manifest. Then one of the repairmen approached Nora. Mrs. Bell, what? Mr. Crane reassigned Tom and Mason. Nora stopped. To where? Cottonwood Station. When? Before dawn. Nora looked across the yard. Crane was speaking quietly with Grant. Tom and Mason were the most experienced repair pair at Juniper. Without them, a damaged wagon could stall half the yard. Nora walked toward Crane. You moved my repair crew. Crane did not deny it. Cottonwood had a wheel failure yesterday. You knew we were being inspected. I manage 7 stations. Juniper is not the only one that matters. Who approved the transfer? I did. Grant looked from one to the other. Crane continued. It falls within my authority. Nora turned to Grant. Does it? Yes, Grant's answer came slowly. Crane allowed himself the smallest smile. Nora nodded once. All right. That surprised both men. She turned back toward the yard. What are you doing? Grant asked. My job. She reassigned 2 loading hands to the repair bay. That made unloading slower. So she cut another promised transfer. A ranch supplier named Horace Vale stormed across the yard 20 minutes later. You told my driver those fencing rolls will sit until tomorrow. Yes, I paid express. You paid for express space if express space existed. I've moved freight through Mercer stations for 9 years. Then you know a wagon cannot carry what won't fit. Vale pointed toward Grant. Your boss is standing right there. Nora looked at Grant. Grant looked at the loaded wagon. Then at Vale. Mrs. Bell runs the station. Vale's face darkened. Then maybe I'll move my business. Grant did not answer. The supplier walked away. Nora watched him go. That one hurt, she said. Yes, Grant's voice had no humor in it. By noon, the inspector had written 3 pages of notes. Crane stayed near him whenever possible. Nora never asked what he was saying. She was too busy fixing problems that should not have existed. At 1 o'clock, Eli brought her a manifest. The North freight is ready. Nora checked the wagon, then the team, then the load. No, Eli lowered his voice. What's wrong? Too much weight. The driver says it'll make the grade. The driver wants to leave. Crane came up behind them. That freight is already 40 minutes late. Nora pulled 1 crate number from the manifest. Take off the machine parts. Crane stepped closer. Weaver paid priority. Then refund the priority charge. That is not your decision. It is during my 90 days. Crane looked toward Grant. Again, Grant said nothing. The silence landed harder than Crane's argument. Nora turned back to Eli. Unload it. The clerk obeyed. Grant followed Nora into the office. She set both hands on the desk. You can disagree with me. I know. You can replace me. I know that too. But do not stand outside and make me guess whether my authority disappears the first time this gets expensive. Grant's face tightened. I am trying to decide whether you are saving the station or shrinking it. Then decide. That simple? No. Nora straightened. That is why it matters. Grant looked away. She continued. I will finish the 90 days because I said I would. But if every hard decision ends with me waiting to see whether you'll protect the numbers or the work, I won't stay afterward. His eyes came back to her. I never offered afterward. No, Nora reached for the next manifest. You didn't. He stayed there another second. Then left. By late afternoon, Grant was no longer watching the yard. He was inside the records room. Crane noticed. So did Nora. Grant pulled dispatch books from Juniper, Cottonwood, Red Mesa, and Black Creek. He compared scheduled departures against freight receipts, horse changes, and arrival slips. At dusk, he carried 4 books to Nora. The same pattern as in Cottonwood. Nora wiped chalk from her fingers. How bad? Worse? Red Mesa? Same? Black Creek? Grant opened the final book. Same. Crane had followed him. That proves nothing. Grant looked at him. It proves the company reports departures no yard could make. Crane folded a dispatch sheet twice. Adjustments keep confidence high. Confidence in what? Crane's voice hardened. In the company you built. Grant closed the book. No. In numbers, I wanted to believe. That evening, the yard stayed crowded long after dark. Workers ate standing beside freight stacks. The repair forge glowed red. Harness chains clicked in the shadows. Nora kept the slate updated under an oil lamp. No number was flattering. Every number was real. Inspector Price approached her. Tomorrow morning I want the North Mail. Nora looked toward the schedule. 6 o'clock? 6. I cannot promise 6. I didn't ask you to. He walked away. Crane appeared beside Eli a few minutes later. His voice was low, but Nora heard enough. If that mail is still sitting here at 6, record the scheduled departure. Eli looked toward Nora. Crane stepped closer. You work for Mercer Freight. So do I, Nora said. Crane turned. Then act like it. Nora walked to the slate and wrote the North Mail at the top of tomorrow's list. Grant found her there after midnight. The yard had finally gone quiet. You heard him, Nora said. Yes, the mail may not leave at 6. It must. Nora looked at him. No, it must leave ready. Grant pulled out his pocket watch. The metal flashed under the lamp. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then he closed the cover. Nora waited. Grant slipped the watch back into his vest. By sunrise, he would have to choose whose rule governed Juniper Junction. At 5:40 the next morning, Juniper Junction was already awake. The repair forge glowed inside the bay. 2 loading men rolled mail sacks toward the northbound coach. Inspector Price stood near the office with his notebook closed beneath one arm. Nora checked the wagon herself. 1 replacement wheel had been fitted during the night. The iron rim sat correctly. The hub did not. She pressed both hands against the wheel and looked toward the repairman. How long? 20 minutes if we do it right. Crane heard him. We do not have 20 minutes. Nora stood. We do. We have 16. Crane pointed toward the office clock. The North Mail leaves at 6. Nora looked at the wagon, then at the load. 3 freight crates had been added behind the mail sacks. Who put those on? Crane answered. Weaver Mine. They're not on the mail manifest. They paid priority. Nora turned toward Eli. Take them off. Crane stepped between them. No, the yard slowed around them. Men who had been moving sacks began watching without appearing to. Grant stood near the gate. He had said almost nothing since arriving. Crane lowered his voice. Mrs. Bell, the inspector is here. The contract depends on this run. That is why it will leave correctly. It will leave at 6. Nora checked the wheel again. Then she looked at the overloaded rear bed. No, Crane walked into the office. Eli followed because he had to. Nora heard Crane speak through the open doorway. Record 6 o'clock. Eli did not move. Crane pushed the dispatch book toward him. I said record it. Nora entered the office. Don't. Crane faced her. You have delayed profitable freight, angered customers, and reduced departures all week. I will not let you lose a territorial contract over 20 minutes. You won't lose it over 20 minutes. You don't know that. No, Nora took the dispatch book and closed it. But I know what happens if we lie. Crane reached for the book. Nora kept her hand on it. You gave me 90 days to run this station. She was speaking to Grant now. This is one of those days. Grant walked inside. Price remained outside the doorway. Crane pointed at the clock. 6 minutes. Grant looked at Nora. What do you need? Remove those 3 crates. Reset the hub properly. Then load the remaining mail in route order instead of by arrival. How late? Maybe 25 minutes. Crane laughed once. Then the inspection is over. Grant turned toward him. Is it? Crane stopped. Grant walked outside. Nora followed. He crossed the yard to the black slate. At the top, beside North Mail, Nora had written 600. Grant picked up the chalk. For a moment his hand stayed against the board. Then he drew one line through the time. He wrote beneath it, delayed wheel repair. The yard went completely still. Crane came out of the office. Grant. Grant did not turn. No more adjusted departures. Crane's face changed. You have contracts based on those figures. I know. Customers will leave. Some might. You'll make every station in the territory look worse overnight. Grant set down the chalk. They already are worse. I just haven't been admitting it. Crane folded the dispatch sheet in his hand. Once, then again. What do you expect me to do? Grant finally faced him. Stop protecting numbers that are hurting the work. Crane's mouth tightened. And if I refuse, then you won't control regional scheduling anymore. The words were quiet. That made them final. Crane looked around the yard. No one celebrated. No one needed to. He handed Grant the folded sheet. All right. Grant passed it to Nora. Run the station. She turned immediately. Eli, remove the Weaver freight. The yard moved again. The unnecessary crates came off. The wheel hub was reset. Nora reorganized the remaining mail so the first route stop sat nearest the rear. At 6:23, the driver climbed onto the seat. Nora checked the wheel one last time. Ready. Eli stood beside the dispatch book. What time? Nora looked at the clock. 6:24. He wrote it exactly. The coach rolled through the gate. Inspector Price watched until it disappeared beyond the eastern rise. Then, he opened his notebook. Crane looked away. The next departure left 9 minutes late. The one after that left 2 minutes late. By afternoon, the yard had stopped backing up. A wagon arriving late no longer forced 3 others to pretend they had left on time. Loads moved in sequence. Repairs were completed before teams were hitched. Men stopped running simply to preserve marks in a book. For the first time since Nora arrived, Juniper Junction looked less hurried and more efficient at the same time. Inspector Price said nothing until sunset. Then, he approached Grant and Nora beside the slate. The territorial office will renew Juniper's contract. Nora stared at him. Price continued. Your scheduled punctuality is worse than last quarter. Grant almost smiled. Price looked at Nora. Your completed deliveries are better. He closed the notebook. And I would rather work with a station that reports 20 honest minutes than one that loses 2 hours hiding them. He tipped his hat and walked toward his horse. Nora looked at Grant. You knew? No, you looked very calm. I was pretending. That earned a short laugh from her. 3 days later, Grant called Crane into the station office. Crane remained with Mercer Freight, but not as regional schedule manager. Grant placed him over supply routing and equipment transfers instead, with every departure time verified by individual stations. Crane accepted without apology. Nora respected that more than a speech. At the end of the 90 days, Grant came to Juniper with another contract. Nora read every line. "Permanent superintendent," she said. Yes, she turned the page. "Profit share. A modest one. That word worries me. It should." Nora looked over the paper again. "And if I disagree with you?" "You will. That wasn't my question." Grant met her eyes. "No, you don't lose authority because I dislike the answer." Nora signed. Grant took the contract back. Then he did something stranger than offering her a freight station. He looked uncertain. "May I call on you Sunday?" Nora folded her arms. "For business?" "No." She made him wait. "Sunday supper is at 6. Grant nodded. "I'll be there. Do not arrive at 5:45 just to improve your record." A smile broke across his face. "I intend to arrive when promised." Weeks later, the renewed territorial contract took effect. Before sunrise, Nora stood beside the cleaned black slate. She lifted a fresh piece of chalk and wrote, "North Mail 6 load on time." Grant came up beside her. He did not take the chalk from her hand. Instead, he held out another piece for the next line. Nora finished the first entry. Then she accepted his. Across the yard, Owen pulled the station bell. Its clear ring carried over the open desert. The loading gate swung wide. At exactly 6 o'clock, the first coach rolled onto the road. If you enjoyed watching Juniper Junction earn its second chance, subscribe and leave a like for more Wild West stories like this one.